Next we are going to do number 24. We're going to test for a relationship or a correlation between mean wet root biomass and in-fauna abundance, and then richness. So we are looking at mean wet root biomass and in-fauna abundance, and then in-fauna taxa richness. So what we want to do for this is we want to go to the Excel. Where's my... Okay, we want to go to the Excel spreadsheet, and in this case we want to get the wet root biomass AC should be the wet weight R, wet weight biomass, R for roots. So I'm going to copy those data, Control C, and then I'm going to go over to SPSS. And I'm going to go ahead and Control V and paste the data, the wet root biomass, into SPSS. And then I'm going to go back to Excel, and I believe I said that we're going to do the in-fauna abundance and taxa richness, right? Okay, let's see. Technically, those, I believe, are already in Excel, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go, not in Excel, they're in SPSS, I'm sorry, right? So I'm going to go ahead and for variable view, I'm going to label that variable, which I placed over here. I am going to name that wet root. And it should be numeric and it should be scale. So wet root should be numeric and scale under measure in the variable view. I'll go back to my data view, and I'm going to go to Analyze, and then I'm going to go down to where it says Correlate. And then I'm going to go over to where it says Bivariate, which is the first option. And I'm going to click on that. We're going to determine if there's a relationship between in-fauna abundance. So I'm going to bring that over. In-fauna richness, and bring that one over. And the wet root mass, biomass, so I'm going to bring that over.
All in comparison to distance.
No distance.
So we go to...
No distance.
We go to...
Correlate, analyze, correlate. A box comes up, you choose bivariate.
Okay.
A box comes up, and then you want to move to the right-hand side, in-fauna abundance, in-fauna richness, and wet root biomass. Mm-hmm. Now think about why we're looking at the wet roots and in-fauna. Because they're amongst, they could be amongst those roots. The wet roots, that's right. Not the dry roots. And then technically we could also see if there's a relationship with the dry roots too. But I've selected wet roots because that's what's actually there in the sediment with them. if we were actually doing this for publication, we might also do the dry roots. Do everything you can to see whatever sort of relationship you can find. So once we do that, notice that you have already selected Pearson correlation coefficient. You don't have to do anything because it's selected. And then we're going to simply press OK. And in an output sheet, we are going to get some statistics. Now, we are interested in looking at how wet roots compare, not compare, bless you, how wet roots, or whether wet roots have a relationship with in-fauna richness and in-fauna abundance. And so we don't need to look at all the information in this because, as you can see, we've got going down in the first column, in-fauna abundance, in-fauna richness, wet roots, and then going across in the first row from left to right, we also have in-fauna abundance, in-fauna richness, and wet roots. So we have duplicates of information here. So really only like part or half of the table is of use to us. So I'm going to look at the very bottom row. Well, not the bottom, but where it says wet roots. Right? You can see maybe it's listed third if you entered them in that order. And I'm going to look at the relationship between wet roots and in-fauna abundance. So, the Pearson correlation coefficient for wet roots and in-fauna abundance is 0.793. And if you look at the p-value below it, tell me if that p-value, that sig value below it, is significant or not.
No different.
Well, we're not looking for differences here, but what are we looking for?
I don't even know what you asked.
We're looking for correlations or relationships here.
Okay.
And so the fact that the p-value of 0.09, all right, do you see that p-value of 0.09? That is our p-value for our relationship between wet roots and in-fauna abundance. And the fact that it is above...
Oh, so there's no relation?
0.05, yes, means there's no relationship. However, again, that's related to sample size because if you look at the correlation, it is number one, positive, because there's no negative sign. Number two, it's also strong. It's a 0.7. That's pretty high for a correlation. And it's that sample size that keeps it from being significant. And in fact, if you look, 0.093 is pretty close to 0.05. So, maybe if we had 6 samples, it would have passed. That's right. So then we look at the relationship between wet roots and in-fauna richness. And what is our correlation coefficient?
Oh, 0.673?
That is correct. It is 0.673. And what is our p-value? 0.143. And is there a relationship? No! Once again, no. So for this, you do not need to make either scatter plot. Again, if you do not have a significant relationship, do not make a graph, but talk about the differences or the relationships that exist, and suggest trends that might actually be occurring despite low sample size.
Okay.
So consequently, what we see here, then, for instance, is that with a greater wet root biomass, we might also have an increase in in-fauna abundance. That there could, in fact, be that strong relationship going on. More wet root biomass, more roots, more abundance of critters in the sediment. So it could potentially be attracting them. But again, with such a low sample size, we really can't say whether or not that's the case.